Hi everyone. The first thing we're going to be discussing today are unobtrusive measures. An unobtrusive measure is a measure of behavior taken on people who are not aware that the researcher is gathering data. Examples of unobtrusive measures can vary from observing the number of people wearing wristwatches at the bank to timing the walking speed of randomly chosen pedestrians over a distance of 100 feet. Other examples of unobtrusive measures are public records, such as political records, magazines, newspapers, or inscriptions on tombstones. In an example provided by the book, Mabley, 1963, found that Chicago's water pressure dropped on the day of a Rose Bowl game moments after the game had ended. For activity 5, we would like you to try and find an article that utilizes unobtrusive data collection. Come prepared to tell us what the purpose of the study was and how the unobtrusive data was collected. Next, we're going to talk about correlational research. Correlational research explores the relationship that exists between variables. The basic concept of how correlational research occurs is that data is collected on two or more variables on the same people, then researchers try to determine if there is a relationship between the variables. Predictions can be made based upon the relationships of the variables. However, it is critical to remember that correlation does not imply causation. Correlational research is different from experimental research. In correlational research, the variables are not manipulated, meaning that there is no experimental treatment being administered. The purpose of correlational research is to analyze relationships among variables and to predict. To help you all better understand the next slide, I wanted to provide us with a refresher on common terms used in correlational research. The first term is the correlation coefficient. The correlation coefficient is usually determined by a Pearson's R analysis. If the coefficient is a negative number, that means that the two variables have an inverse relationship. If one variable gets larger, then the other gets smaller. 0 means that there is no correlation. A positive coefficient means that there is a direct relationship. If one variable gets bigger, the other variable gets bigger. Next, as a researcher, you'll want to determine the magnitude of the correlation. To find the magnitude of the correlation, you must take the absolute value of the correlation coefficient. The closer to 1 the number is, the stronger the relationship between the two variables is. Next, we're going to discuss the steps in correlational research. In any research, the first step is to define and delimit the problem. Researchers should use past research in order to carefully define and delimit the problem. When gathering participants, it is important to select from a pertinent population. The sample can influence the magnitude and the direction of the correlation coefficient. If a sample is too specific and similar, it may be difficult to yield high correlation between variables since everyone is so similar. A downside of predictional studies is that the results can only be used to specific population targeted in the sample. With data collection, it can be collected in a variety of ways, such as anthropometric performance tests or observational techniques. It is, however, important to remember that scores must be able to be quantified. The data that was collected can be analyzed in a number of different ways. A simple correlation or multiple correlations can be done to see how variables associate with the performance or behavior. Factor analyses can be run for data reduction to help condense common factors. Finally, structural modeling is a technique used to analyze theoretical models who have causal relationships among 3 or more variables. A limitation of correlational research is poor choice of criterion variable. When a poor criterion variable is chosen, it becomes difficult to define operationally and to measure its reliability. An example of a bad criterion variable is success, because success can be difficult to define and measure. Throughout today's presentation, Chris, Nick, and myself have outlined 6 different descriptive research methods. Before we conclude the presentation, let's quickly summarize the types of research methods we covered today. First, we covered developmental research, which is the study of changes in behaviors across years. There are 2 types of developmental research: longitudinal research, which examines the same participants over time, and cross-sectional research, where researchers examine different participants at each age level. Next is case study, where a researcher studies a single case in depth to reach a greater understanding about similar cases. Thirdly, we discussed a job analysis, which is a type of case study that determines the nature of a particular job and the types of requirements and skills necessary to be successful at that job. Next, we discussed observational research, which is a technique where one observes individuals' behaviors. Fifthly, we looked at unobtrusive measures which measures the behavior of people who are not aware that the researcher is gathering data. Finally, correlational research explores the relationship between 2 or more variables. Here are our references. Thank you for listening to our presentation. If you have any questions, please be prepared to ask in class on Monday. Thank you.